We are less than 2 weeks away from UFC 314, with Alexander the Great Volkanovski having one last chance perhaps to attain UFC gold. We all know that Alexander Volkanovski is one of the greatest featherweights, perhaps the greatest featherweight to have ever stepped on the UFC octagon. He has beaten all the most elite guys in this division's history. He has already been etched in the UFC history books. He has already cemented his legacy as such, and that can never be taken away from him. He's already one of the greats. He's already a Hall of Famer. But he is approaching a huge opportunity, a huge fight, following Ilia Topuria vacating the belt. Ilia Topuria vacated that gold. He's like, you know what? I'm moving up. And here it is. The UFC vacated undisputed featherweight belt for the taking. And the UFC is like, okay, Alexander Volkanovski, you were the dominant champion. It's only been you had this belt around your waist since around this time last year before you lost it to Ilia. It only makes sense that you're going to get a shot at a completely new challenger, a rising contender in Diego Lopes trying to make a name for himself. And Alexander Volkanovski has the chance to make one of the greatest redemption stories that the sport has seen and have that belt wrapped around his waist one more time. Wouldn't you love to see this? I know I would. Draped in the Australian flag, having that gold put around his belt, the belt around his waist. Would be one of the oldest UFC champions. This guy was only a champion around this time last year still. He came into this octagon with this belt before losing it to Ilia Topuria. Ilia Topuria, a hungry, up-and-coming, undefeated, swag, clean, just a crazy featherweight contender that ended up putting the lights out on Volk. People thought that Volk maybe stepped in a little bit too soon after the Islam head kick to defend his belt against Ilia at featherweight. People had their doubts. Volk dropped 2 out of his last 3 coming into that fight and both of them were just lightweight fights though versus Islam. He moved up. And that head kick was in a short notice fight. They took a week. In their first fight, he gave Islam one of the hardest fights of Islam's career. And Alexander Volkanovski, he's gone through his catalog. You look at his catalog. It's a crazy catalog for featherweight. Won how many consecutive fights? I don't even know the exact number. I'm not going to try to guess it. But he won he had a crazy win streak coming into that Islam Makhachev fight. Trilogy, won all 3 versus Max Holloway. Beat the Korean Zombie, beat Brian Ortega. Jose Aldo you could put in there. Also beat Yair Rodriguez when Yair Rodriguez became the interim champion in Volk's absence. Volk then beat him to reassert himself as the undisputed champion. That was in between the 2 Islam fights. Comes again, Abu Dhabi, of course, gets head kicked. One of the head kicks heard around the world in vicious fashion by Islam. One of Islam's few knockout finishes. It was devastating to see. Comes back, UFC 298 Anaheim to defend against Ilia, gets knocked out in the second round. Was it second or third? No, third maybe. Ilia Topuria begins his legendary story. This could be one of the most tragic downfalls to a guy's career that we have seen. From the heights and peaks that we've seen Alexander Volkanovski hit to now what could be an all-time low if he drops 3 in a row. Especially if Diego Lopes knocks him out. Which, as we loom closer to this fight date, I start to play more and more in my head the possibility of this happening. A repeat of the last fight. Alexander Volkanovski, this could go either way, right? I would like to lean towards more Alexander Volkanovski more because he, with the experience, the depth that he has, being the well-established featherweight, the bodies that are put behind his name of who he's gone through in this division. He's never lost a featherweight other than Ilia Topuria. He has the depth, he has the experience, he has the well-rounded game. We don't know how legit Diego Lopes is. Diego Lopes' opposition has not been up to par with the guys that Volkanovski has been in there with. Brian Ortega and Dan Ige, hey, they okay, but that ain't no Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander Volkanovski ain't that old. He's 36. I mean, he's getting up there, but he ain't that old. And if you remember, Alexander Volkanovski, him, Israel Adesanya, and Kamaru Usman were one of the great eras of the UFC. When McGregor wasn't really having, much fights. They had their own little era. They were running the UFC at one point. They were all crazy champions. But Volk is the last stand on that. We don't know where the hell Kamaru Usman is. Israel Adesanya is on one of the worst downfalls also. Just completely fell off the mountaintop from where he was in his division. After being a dominant champion, he's lost 3 straight. He might even be a main event in his next fight. He might just be on a main card, Israel Adesanya. The UFC is like, here you go, Volk. We're returning to you, a champion that has been there for us so many years, being the face of our featherweight division. Here you go. We thought that Ilya was going to run this division for years to come, but now he's vacated it. Here you go. The belt is in front of you, and you got to get through a new, fresh, contending guy that you've never fought before, who's trying to make a name for himself out of Mexico. That is what Alexander Volkanovski is looking to do, and I'm confident that Alexander Volkanovski will do it and make this kind of history in Miami. But again, it's a real possibility that Lopez has a good night and Volk has another bad night. Volk has had plenty of time to contemplate and sit and really hone in on what he needs to adjust after coming off 2 straight knockout losses and losing 3 out of his last 4, right? Lost to Islam, beat Yair, lost to Islam, then lost to Ilya. You could imagine that I think after this, if Diego Lopez does knock out Volk, Volk would have a long climb back to the top, or maybe he shouldn't even fight anymore. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing, Volk face all the new challenges in the UFC, but what would be his motivations if he doesn't have the belt, if he doesn't have the gold at this point in his career? This really feels like this is for sure the make it or break it fight for Alexander Volkanovski. This is the make it or break it fight. You're coming off 2 straight losses, but here you go, a fresh new matchup that you definitely are in the narrative to win. So here you go, Volk. An undisputed featherweight belt on the line. Are you going to go get it and become our champion again? Reclaim your throne at the featherweight division and it would be incredible. It would be incredible. And I'm very confident that Volk is going to get in there and do what he does. Although I don't know if he'll finish Lopez. I think I could see it going to decision. But Lopez has quick hands. He has quick hands. We saw him do it to Brian Ortega. He got him early, but then woke him back up with a follow-up jab. But yeah, this is it right here. And I'm definitely so excited to break down the card in its entirety. I want to get more in depth. But for right now, I just needed to get on here and really soak it in. Try to understand the situation we are in right now. Where Volk is once again fighting. Maybe one of the last ones of his career. We don't know how many more we'll have left in him. And he's one of our great champions we've had in the last couple years. Again, he had the belt around this time last year but then he lost to Ilya. Either he makes one of the greatest redemption stories, or he has one of the greatest downfalls, one of the most tragic downfalls we've ever seen. Volk, I have faith. Let's do this. Let's do this in 2 weeks in Miami.